Hi guys, hope you're doing fine. Today we're back with yet another video about lighting setup. Today we're going to take this image or these kinds of images using this setup in practically any location. So I'm currently in Boden, which is a smaller city in the northern parts of Sweden. This is my parents' house and I'm visiting my mother for a couple of days. So I set this location up in the living room where I was born and raised. Obviously, I wasn't born and raised in the living room, but this is in the house where I was born and raised. As you can see, or I'm not sure if you can see everything here, but this is actually a living room where time stopped in the 70s. I have brown walls and it's really dense, saturated, moody colors, and this is going to affect the scene. So the reason why I'm placing the setup in the middle of the room is I want to avoid that the flashes reflect into the surfaces of the walls and the floor, which would give me a yellow tint in my face, and we want to avoid that. So I'm going to walk you through the setup so that you can see how the different light affects the image and what it does and what I'm using gear-wise, so that you get a proper understanding how to set this up in practically any location. And I would also like to point out that you can do this location even outside. You don't need a living room, you don't need to be inside if you have flashes that can support high-speed sync or high sync. So first and foremost, we have the main light. The main light is an Elinchrom 5 placed in a 100 centimeter shallow octabox. And it's placed on an Avenger C stand aimed slightly towards me, and it's aimed down at me, and I have it set about 1 meter from my face. The closer the light is to my face, the softer the shadow will appear. As a kicker or a light that separates me from the background, I'm using the Elinchrom 1, and it's placed in a rectangular softbox with a grid. And the reason why I'm using a grid is that I don't want the light to spill too much on the background, and I also don't want that light to bump in the wall that is situated somewhere around here, which could actually give a reflection with yellow light on my face, and I want to avoid that. I have the background. The background is a Colorama paper background. I think it's 1.35 meters wide. You don't need a wider background if you're doing a headshot or if you're doing a torso portrait. So all these images where you see the backdrops that are like 2 or even 3 meters wide, that's not necessary if you're using a one-color backdrop for occasions where you only need to take a picture of the torso or maybe even the face. The color is spruce, so that's also the color that I'm using on the corporate shoot that I'm doing in a couple of weeks. It's a Force company, so that is the reason why I chose the green color. Some of the images that they have taken before are taken outside, but in this case we're going to use this green color to give a kind of a resemblance of something that is nature oriented. We're going to take the image on a hotel location, so it's going to be lots of people and it's going to be a lot of movement. So I need to find a place where I can set this up. But as you see, it doesn't really matter what I have around me, since in this case I have the backdrop, which is actually quite effectively isolating me from the situation I have around me. This area is approximately, I would say, maybe 3 times 3 meters. That is all you need to be able to set this up. Since I'm sitting down on a piano chair at this moment, I don't need a ceiling height that is super high. I think this ceiling might be somewhere around 2.4, 2.5 meters, which is somewhere around normal. And this is more than enough for this kinds of situation. I would have to have a bit higher ceiling if I was to stand up, but in this case it works perfectly okay for me sitting down. The camera that I took this image with is a Sony a7R5. I have it set to 1/1600 of a second to actually block out the surrounding light. And I have it set to 1.4 in aperture, and the ISO is set to 100. I'm using this Skyport trigger. I think it's called Skyport. It's just like some kind of Skyport, wireless Skyport thing that I use to trigger these flashes wirelessly. So having cables and stuff, sync cables that you have like 10 years ago, that's not really the way you shoot with flashes anymore. Most people I know use these kinds of Skyport triggers or whatever brand you have to be able to trigger the flashes wirelessly. This also means that you can actually move around with your camera without having to trip on sync cables lying around on the floor, which is really convenient. So the Elinchrom 1 in the background here is set to 0.6 in power. That is fairly low in comparison to what the flash actually is able to handle. And the Elinchrom 5 is set to 2.3 in power. And the Elinchrom 5 is much more powerful than the Elinchrom 1. So you have a lot of power to play with here. It's not even remotely near the capacity of these flashes. Since the environment is rather dark, I don't have to push up the power of the flashes that high. I'm shooting this on a Sigma 85mm 1.4, or actually the video that I'm shooting is shot on the Sony a7R5 with a 35mm lens, but the portrait that I took is shot on a Sigma 85mm 1.4 and the Sony a7R5. So that is it, guys. This was kind of an unstructured walkthrough of this lighting setup. I hope you learned something, so feel free to comment down below if you have any thoughts or questions about this lighting setup. I will be happy to answer them, and I would also really appreciate your support if you were able to give your thumbs up, maybe pushing that notification bell, and even consider subscribing. That would mean the world to me. I wish you a great day. Stay safe.